Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Gopi. Today I'm going to do a review on Mungyo's watercolor crayon set. It's in their gallery line and it comes in sets of 12, 24, and 36. I have the biggest set, the 36 one, and at this point I've had this set for about 2 months and have created a lot of art using these crayons. So I'm ready to make a review on it. I hope you will like it. So this is what the set looks like. I changed the order of the crayons. It looked completely different when I got it. And also there was some kind of a protective sheet here, like some kind of a wax paper that I threw away. I no longer have it. Also there was a protective sleeve over this box that I have no idea where I put, so I no longer have that either. I only have like this packaging. The set itself is very budget friendly. I paid around like the equivalent of like 15 UK pounds for this set, but it it varies in different countries. Also, having watched different reviews from various artists, I heard that the Sargent watercolor crayons and also the Staedtler crayons were almost identical to these, if not the same. So if you consider buying watercolor crayons, those could also be an option. So when you get the set, I recommend that you create your own color chart. So I did mine. This is Canson XL watercolor paper that I cut it to fit into the cardboard box. So I created this little chart, and you can see that the colors are very vibrant, very nice. Although not all of them are equally vibrant. Some of them seem a little bit more muted, but that's not a problem for me. I actually really enjoy having all these earthy colors. I especially like this bottom line of colors. They're so interesting and I use them a lot. Also, if you like to create fan art or portraits or any like character design, then there's plenty of skin tones or colors that can be used for creating skin tones. So also all the greens and these vibrant pinks and purples are good for florals. So I'm actually very happy with the color selection. It looks overall like a set that can be used for various purposes, so that in itself is very promising. I've seen reviews in which people were complaining a little bit that these crayons do not completely dissolve in water. That is definitely true. You can definitely see that some of the colors left traces. I actually applied some heavy rubbing on the paper and still some of the colors left crayon marks, especially here you can see. So that is something that you have to keep in mind, that if you don't like these kind of textured looks, then this may not be the medium for you. Also, there's definitely a solution to that. You can dissolve these crayons and use them directly from a palette. So that's something that I use frequently, especially when I use the crayons for portraits and I really don't want any pencil marks in the picture. I know it's been a hot topic whether Mungyo's gallery line is light fast or not, and also whether the gallery line is considered artist grade or not. So I decided to do my own light fastness test, also because Mungyo doesn't really provide too much information on the light fastness usually. So it seemed like a good idea to create my own chart and do my own test. So these are the results. These two charts hung up in my window for about 7 weeks, and then after 7 weeks one of the papers just simply fell off my window, and I simply decided not to put it back, especially because I could see that many of the colors have already faded, so that was an indication that many of the colors are not light fast. As you can see, I have created my own rating system, which is a complete speculation. It does not come from Mungyo. Just so you know, this is not the official light fastness rating. There isn't one. It just helps me see how light fast each color is. So although I have to say, I really wouldn't recommend that you use these crayons for finished pieces that you are going to hang up on a wall or sell. So let's take a look at all the colors. They're all very vibrant. Also, like I said earlier, you can definitely see traces of crayons left on the paper, even though I tried to rub them really hard. So they do not completely dissolve in water. So looking at the colors, there are some colors that obviously did not surprise me at all, like the salmon pink, the skin tone, and also the light purples and pinks have faded, and that's completely normal. But there were some surprises, like this red, number 313, and also the red brown, and the crimson and the rose pink also held up really nicely, which really surprised me, because these colors only hung up in my window for about 7 weeks, but it's like springtime here in Hungary where I live, and they did get a fair amount of sunlight, so I was really surprised that these colors did not fade. Also the violet started to fade a little bit maybe, but altogether held up really nicely. And what came as a surprise to me personally is that so many of the greens have faded, and not just that, but basically broke down and changed color altogether, because obviously they are mixtures of different pigments, and the fugitive pigments disappeared and it completely changed the color. As the next step, I wanted to quickly show you how to use these crayons and 3 different ways that you can use them. So I will quickly try them out in this Canson XL watercolor pad. So obviously the first one, I'm going to use this dark ochre color. So the first one is using them directly on the paper. You can see how it dissolves on the paper quite nicely, and also a lot of pigment comes off the layer, so it's enough to spread in quite a large area. But like I said earlier, you can see definitely some traces left on the paper, so you have to be mindful of that. If you want to avoid having these kind of traces, I would recommend using a dry palette. This is the method that I use for all my fan art. I've actually used these crayons mostly for fan art. So I mixed a lot of skin tones and stuff, and this is kind of the best way to do that. So it seems a lot nicer this way. And the third way of using them, and this is also something that I use frequently, is that I go back to the first layer of the that I laid down wet, and I simply use them as normal crayons. These can also be used as regular crayons. They kind of have the similar, like a very similar feel to the Crayola crayons and other kids' crayons, although I have to say these are a lot more pigmented. Going back to the packaging, there's also one information that I would like to share with you, that these sleeves, protective sleeves covering the crayons, they are very loose. So the crayons keep moving around, and when you use them and press them down, they do this. So the only way to use them is I have to kind of hold the tip of the crayon. So it's a little bit messy this way, but okay, so finally, let's take a look at some actual art that I created using these crayons. Like I said, I use these crayons mostly for fan art, so that's the kind of art that I will be able to show to you. This drawing of BTS Jungkook is probably my favorite, and I mix different techniques using these crayons so I can show you a lot of different ways of using it. So first I laid down the skin tone that I mixed from the palette that I showed you earlier, and then I created this very textured hair going with the crayons directly on the paper, and then first re-wetting them and then going over them once again, using them simply as dry crayons. And I also really enjoyed creating this texture in his clothes. Although I have to point out that one limitation that this supply has is that it builds up wax really quickly. It's very waxy. So you can only lay down like 2, maximum 3 layers for like a skin tone before it gets so waxier that it will no longer take any more layers, unless you use the crayons directly on the paper, which is not something you want to do in case of a portrait. Or maybe you do, but I definitely don't. So this is why you can see these pencil marks on the shadowy side of his face. I was no longer able to add further layers, so I simply had to use a color pencil. So something to keep in mind, there's a limitation to layering these crayons. So if that's a technique that you like to use, these crayons may not be the best supplies for you. Some other arts that I created with this drawing of Taeyeon, also the hair. I really like creating texture for hairs and clothes, but it's definitely trickier for painting the face. And in this one, this was actually the first piece that I painted using these crayons. You can definitely see, I will try to bring them a little bit closer. You can definitely see that I reached the absolute limitation of layering here, even though I don't think I put down more than 3 layers. And then from that moment on, I could only use pencils on top of the painting. So just something that you should be aware of, definitely. I also wanted to show you an example when I used further details as dry crayons on top of a drawing. So I made this drawing of Taeyeon, and I wanted to create this like spring scenery in the back. And all of these tulips that I drew, they are basically dry crayons. I did not activate them with water. Also these cherry blossoms in the back, they had 1 wet layer or maybe 2, and then I went all over it with the dry crayons. And also the hair was created using the crayons directly on the paper. So this is probably the best example to use all kinds of techniques using these crayons, and this is all I could achieve. So you have to be aware that these crayons have a very specific look. They don't look like regular transparent, like Western style watercolors. They are a lot more opaque. They appear a lot waxier, more waxier than watercolor pencils, or at least most of them. So you're going to see a lot of texture. And the reason why I keep repeating this is because if you don't like texture, if you don't like opaque colors, and you don't like this kind of sketchy look, then I do not recommend this set for you. So just to be completely transparent here. Another thing that I would like to mention, that this is something that I already said earlier, that this is super budget friendly. I have already created a lot of art in the past 2 months using these crayons, and still you can see that there's barely any missing. It looks completely brand new still. The only crayon that appears a little bit shorter is the black, but even that is just like a very tiny bit missing. So these crayons, it appears that they are gonna last forever, or at least for a very long time. So if you like this kind of look that we had discussed earlier, and you would like to purchase a set that's going to last you a very long time, then I can definitely recommend this set for you, but it's definitely not for everyone. So that concludes this video. Thank you very much for watching this. Please let me know in the comments if you have tried them and what your experiences were. I'm very interested in what kind of effects people manage to achieve using these crayons, and also whether you like it or not, because these are quite unique, like a very unique supply to use. So I'm interested in your experiences. And so thanks again for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.